crumble beneath my feet. Sunlight traces memories of their skin. I look out into the silent valley on remnants of where their hearts and souls have been. Let the air that's breathing from the four winds come out and let me in. Hala, hala, So join together hand in hand and march out from the echoes of our past. It's you alone who's been chosen here, so come out and meet your destiny at last. Let the air that's breathing from the four winds come out and let me in. Let the air that's breathing from the four winds come out and let me in. Hala, hala, Thoughts left unanswered for thousands of years will finally meet their missing peace of mind. To walk together without having met, believe it, and one day I promise you will find. Oh, you'll find. Hala, hala, yeah, yeah, oh. Hala, hala, oh, yeah, yeah, oh. Hala, hala, hala,
Hi, Judy. Hey, Sally.
Hello.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. I had cataract surgery on Wednesday, so my vision is really cockeyed. I'm just sort of
Wow.
these funky reading glasses. It's
How are you feeling?
great, just great. It's a wonderful thing.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
Yeah. How are you all?
Good. Excited for this evening.
Yeah, me too. Me too. It's gonna be great. Harry was awesome.
He is. Yeah, Naomi is his mom who's here.
Hi, Naomi. It's great talking to you. Gabby.
Hi,
Hi, Naomi.
how are you?
Hey, Gabby. Hey, Naomi.
Hi,
Hey.
everyone.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Oh, we are very happy that you're here. Thank you.
Oh, it's so exciting.
It really is. We're thrilled to be able to do this. And it's nobody's traveling, nobody's doing anything, but it's a big month.
Yeah, I guess that's true. We're in a little travel slump.
Yes.
No.
To me,
Well, except
this is
except for
much
mine.
better. I really prefer this, honestly. I feel like you can be comfortable and have the content and not worry about some of the stress of a large gathering.
There are advantages. I also enjoy this perfectly fine, but I know plenty of people who just cannot stomach sitting at a computer. So
No.
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a rough time for them.
Yeah, it's just so different. I taught in person at our religious school today for the first time in probably mid-December, and it was amazing because just everybody masks on.
Right.
It's really fun. Just a
I love the music. So
Oh. Do you know Josh Bortowski?
it sounded familiar to me. I couldn't place it. So that's who it is.
Yeah, he's a conservative rabbi ordained maybe, I don't know, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And his work is writing new Jewish music and performing.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I'm just sharing from Spotify.
Really nice.
Yeah. Hello, Steins. Hello, Barbara.
Hello, Rabbi. I'm eating
Hi.
dinner, so my camera is off.
What are you having? You just want to know what you're eating for dinner.
You really? I am eating some Trader Joe's. They're sort of fish sticks, but they're not. They're little pieces of fried fish that you do in the oven for 20 minutes and then you eat them up.
Do you know Amazon provides
All right. Enjoy that.
They know you value your time outside of work, juggling family, school, friends, or other activities. That's why they offer a variety of shifts that work for you.
Oh, and the downside of unpaid Spotify, you get the commercials.
Yeah.
With great starting pay and sign-on bonuses. If you want a
Oh, well,
career that
what can you do?
fits to your lifestyle, head to Amazon.com/apply. Amazon is a proud equal opportunity
From
employer.
Sherwin, wonderful.
Look at you, listening to Spotify while you do.
I will stop sharing while it's on commercial. Gotta remember to do that.
Sense to promote. Yeah, your business.
Hi, Sherwin.
Whether you have 2 employees or 2,000, your voice can reach as broad or as narrow an audience as
Hey.
and with them.
Hello, Hope.
Can't. Try it today at Ad Studio.
Hi,
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Just gonna give our other friends another minute or two to join us, particularly our guest of honor.
To turn to cold water washing with time. The NFL, your uniforms get dirty.
I've been watching the Olympics.
Oh, I haven't seen any of that yet.
Rookie, turn to cold with time. And that's the
How are our
I
team?
actually recorded the whole thing last night, like all 300 hours of it, so I could watch the figure skating and speed through the rest of the stuff. But I haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
Well, that girl from Westport took a silver yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I heard. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's called freestyle downhill, where you do twists and flips with snowboard on.
Snowboard.
It's insane. Absolutely insane.
That's cool.
No, it's insane.
Yeah, I agree with you, Steve.
Awesome to watch while being insane.
No, it's strictly insane.
Terrifyingly insane.
But maybe she can get a Wheaties endorsement. Do they still do that?
Just
Remember
going
when
to the
they-
top, just going to the top of the hill, where they have to come down from, is frightening. We were up in upstate New York, Lake Placid, and we saw the hills that they used in the American ones. And just from the top of the hill, there is no way you could push me, even with a gun behind me. to go down that ramp. It is frightening. Yeah, Linda could. Linda just said she could.
I couldn't go.
Better them than us. Sounds like.
Well, that's why it was a woman that won the medal, Steve.
She's also very young.
No, 24.
She's 24.
Oh,
This is
it's like
second-
all of the skaters that I've seen are all like 15.
15 is the one from Russia.
And there was another one who was, I can't remember where she was from, but they're really young.
Wow.
The three top Russian skaters are 15, I think 16 and 17.
Yeah.
And they're really good.
Hi, Harry. It's good to see you.
Harry, you made it. Hi.
Hello.
All right.
Hi, Rebecca.
Oh, it's good to see you because I was looking at your mom and wondering what you were doing these days since, I remember us singing together and haven't seen you in like forever.
Yeah, I've just been up in college.
Where are you?
I'm in Fredonia. It's up by Buffalo.
You like it?
It's been it's been okay for me right now. Just academically, still, it's okay. I'll say that.
What are you studying? Music? What are you going to study?
Sound recording technology. So yes, music.
Oh, interesting. Cool. Well, good for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Well, now that Harry resolved his internet issues, now we can begin. We're so very happy that you're all able to be with us this evening for this really, really special program. If you feel comfortable turning on your video so we can all be together, that would be wonderful. And if for any reason you need to keep it off, we understand. So I'm going to open with some words of Torah, and then I'll hand it over to this evening's facilitators. Yesterday on Shabbat, we read the parasha called Truma, which lays out the plan for a tabernacle or a sanctuary, a physical space where God's presence, the Shekhinah, can meet the Israelite people. And the Torah says, Ve'asu li mikdash v'shachanti v'tocham. Let them make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell in their midst, says God. And I love this pasuk. I love this pasuk more than any other pasuk in the whole parasha, and it is one of the best ones in the whole Torah, in my opinion. I love that God expresses a need that only human beings can fill. I love that there's a place where human and divine can meet, and it's a place of kedusha, of holiness. And I love that it's made from all sorts of different materials brought by the Israelites, not provided by God. They brought red, blue, and purple fabrics, gold and silver and bronze items, and acacia wood of all shapes and sizes. Whatever each person had, they contributed. All of it had a place in the Mikdash, and by extension, every Israelite also had a place in the Mikdash. We've come together this evening to celebrate the diversity among us and to examine the ways we can better include each of us. This is the start, or rather day 6 of JDAIM, Jewish Disabilities Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month. And I take it as our starting point that each of us has a place in our Jewish community and in our synagogue. Tonight, we go past the words and we ask ourselves, does every person really feel that they have a place? Do you feel like you really have a place? Are there perhaps some who feel excluded to some degree? How might we better understand their or your needs? How might we together widen our mikdash, our proverbial and our literal sanctuary, to see, to embrace, to accept, and to include every Jew? We are so grateful to Shelley and Gabby of Inclusion Innovations for facilitating our program this evening, and especially to our beloved congregant, Harry Heffler, coming to us directly from his dorm room, for being part of this evening's conversation. Thank you all for being here. Shelley and Gabby, handing it off to you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Oh, so good to be here. And, back in the day was 2 years ago, I would travel from community to community and speak during JDAIM and also the rest of the year. That's what I do. That's my beloved occupation. And on March 1st, 2020, I returned home, and that was the end of the traveling. That was it. And so I really had to rethink and re-envision what inclusion is, and also how I could continue to factor in, to raise awareness, to be the nudge. And it's taken me about a year, a little over a year, and I'm very excited because there's so many great things now that I'm able to do because of technology, because of the way that we all have adapted to that technology. And one of the gifts, the blessings of all of this is that I get to work with my dear friend, Gabrielle Kaplan-Mayer, or Gabby, as we call her, as she calls herself. And back in April of 2020, Gabby and I were having a conversation, kind of thinking about, well, what is this world going to be like, now? And as I thought about it, I realized quite sadly that I wasn't going to be able to get together with all the amazing people that I meet on my journey. There's a lot of us in the faith community, disability and mental health inclusion movement. It is a movement. It's exciting that it's a movement, and from all different faiths. And we get together about once a year to learn together, to teach, to think about ways that we can continue to help congregations and people with disabilities, people with mental health conditions, and those who love them to foster a sense of belonging. And I said to Gabby, I'm so sad because at conferences, I learned so much from all these fabulous speakers. And, they just really, it's like some of these things I go to, it's like going to camp. It's so much fun. And we came up with an idea. We said, why don't we bring the speakers together? Let's do a web series called Everyone's Welcome. And we did that. We had 24 episodes called Everyone's Welcome, a fresh conversation about disability. And we would have conversations with people, simply back and forth conversations, and people would watch our show and stream it. And we were very excited about that. And so our collaboration, one of the most beautiful things about it, besides the fact that we got to bring all these amazing people to a whole new audience, is that we get to work together. And so we decided during JDAIM, we would love to work together. And so we are creating a podcast now called Stories of Belonging. And that's where we are at the moment with all of you. And we're bringing you some stories of belonging, both our own and Harry's. Harry, I'm so excited for you to share your story. And all of you, we're going to have time at the end for Q&A and comments. Put things in the chat. We're good with that. We love to hear back from you. If you're comfortable, feel free to show your wonderful countenance, your face. And if not, that's okay too. So Rabbi, I want to go back to the Mishkan for a minute. And there's a particular pasuk in Isaiah in 56:7, and all of you will be familiar with this. Is a very, very well-known sentence. My house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. So you've heard that, yes? A lot of congregations say we are a house of prayer for all peoples. And when I read that, I was thinking, I wonder what that really means. How can you be a house of prayer for all peoples? Do you do blanket accommodations? Do you have captioning? Do you have large print materials? Do you change the lighting so people can see the page? Do you have segregated classrooms. What is going on? And I thought there's got to be more to this. For my house shall be a house of prayer for all people. That's the aspiration. That's what all of us are and will become. But I dug a little further, and I didn't have to go very far. I found the rest of the parsha, or the pasuk. And this is what Isaiah said. So I just want to share this with you. I will bring them to my holy mount, and I will cause them to rejoice in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be acceptable upon my altar, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples. And that goes right back to Truma. It's in action, not inaction, but in action. It's inclusion in action. It's belonging in action. It's the relationship between God and the Jewish people, and the relationship between God and each one of us. And so I like to think of that where our congregations are in this world of inclusion is starting to focus more on belonging, and what gives people a sense of belonging, and how do we achieve that. So we're going to start out tonight. I'm going to let you hear from Gabby, and I'm just going to kind of think, we're going to share some questions with each other. I want you to be thinking about these questions too in your own experiences and so forth. And Gabby, you want to tell a little bit about yourself? My gosh.
I'm happy to. First of all, I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. We're going to jump into a very rich conversation. First with Shelley and me, then with Harry, and with all of you. So please don't hesitate to put questions and comments into the chat. I'm a writer, I'm an advocate, I'm a Jewish educator. I run an initiative called Whole Community Inclusion that serves the Jewish community in Philadelphia. But as you'll hear when Shelley and I share our own stories, probably the most significant awakening for me about creating a world where all people belong was when my son, when he was 3, he's 19 now, was diagnosed with profound autism, and that set our family on a journey of rethinking everything that we knew about access and inclusion. So you'll find out all of it. Shelley, can I start by asking you a question?
Sure.
Okay, so let's jump in, and my question for you, Shelley, is what inspired your connection to belonging and to the Jewish community? What was your inspiration?
Well, it didn't come from external sources. I've always been kind of a march to my own drummer. And my experiences growing up, I live in Minneapolis. I've lived here all my life. And I went to the Talmud Torah of Minneapolis for 10 long years of sometimes very miserable long years. And the one thing that I gained, the one thing I learned that almost instinctively I knew, we learned to read Hebrew through reading the Tanakh, or reading the starting with Bereshit. And I wasn't a very good Hebrew reader. I really struggled. And still, I just loved Torah. It's just a connection, a pull. It's hard to explain. It's just kind of part of who I am. And that really kept me engaged in the Jewish community. But I also had a lot of social anxiety, and because I was a poor Hebrew reader, when I had to be called on to read in class, because that's what they did back in the day, they called on every kid. My Hebrew school teacher, Mark Haas, saw one part of me. He saw this part of me, the lovely little part on my head, because I didn't want to get called on. And I figured if I didn't look up, he wouldn't call on me. And then I would be okay. Well, he did call on me, and I was awkward and uncomfortable, terribly. Now, fast forward, I sort of walked away from Judaism I didn't go to anything else. I just kind of walked away from the organized part of Judaism when I was in, after I was in USY. I loved USY, and in college. And shortly after college, I met this guy named Rick Christensen. Okay. There's a joke that goes with this name. Anyway, we fell in love. We got married. And we were married by a rabbi from St. Paul who took the time to get to know our stories and understood and supported us to raise a Jewish family. And that's exactly what we did. Now, I like to say, and I speak to a lot of Jewish audiences when I introduce myself, I like to say, my name is Shelley Christensen. That's the Jewish spelling. It is. We raised Jewish children. They all went to our synagogue's religious school. They all did the same, went to the same school, learned the same things, had their B'nai Mitzvah. Our middle son, Jacob, was diagnosed with ADHD. Subsequently, he was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome when he was 15. By that time, I had been diagnosed with ADHD. And I am proud to talk about my diagnosis because we all have things that are gifts and strengths, even within what some would consider to be something negative. And ADHD is, for me, a tremendous gift. Well, our children went through religious school. We never had any concerns about Jacob's education. His teachers, the administrator, the rabbis treated him like everyone else. He got to do the same things everybody else did. And it wasn't an issue until I learned when I decided to, I wanted to go into Jewish communal service, and I was hired to direct a program in Minneapolis that was it was called the Jewish Community Inclusion Program for people with disabilities. And my job was to be the nudge. My job was to educate and support congregations, the schools, even Talmud Torah, and any Jewish institution to be able to wisely, compassionately, and supportively bring people with disabilities, mental health conditions, and those that love them into Jewish life. And that's where I learned that very few families had the experiences we had at our congregation, that there was so much marginalization going on, children being kicked out of religious schools, and adults with disabilities allowed to go to special programs for people with disabilities. And that just struck me as so counter to I think, one of the basic tenets of Judaism, that we're all created in God's image, that there's a spark of the divine in all of us. And so that's really guided my work. And that is really fostered a sense of belonging. I've felt that sense of belonging my whole adult life, and my kids have too. And my husband, P.S., converted to Judaism right before our 18th wedding anniversary. So that's my story. And I really feel so called to this work that I do. It's quite amazing. Well, enough about me. Gabby, tell us about your sense of belonging and how you are connected into the Jewish community. What is that, those ideas you have?
Sure, Shelley. So even though you and I know each other well, I always learn something new from you. And I hope that as Shelley was answering, and as I share my answer, that what's percolating for you is that self-reflection, like, oh, what communities do I belong to? When did I first feel a sense of belonging in Jewish community or other communities? So I grew up in a small town in central Pennsylvania. I live in the Philadelphia area now. And not a lot of Jewish people. At my elementary school, there were 2 of us. And so sometimes people think that in a small town, like, how could you have a strong, rich Jewish life and identity? But I just grew up with a sense of belonging because everyone really mattered. It was important that everyone showed up when there wasn't, a big Jewish community. So belonging and Jewish community for me from a young age were very intertwined. But in so many ways in my life, I didn't feel a sense of belonging. Definitely at my school, being Jewish when there was really no diversity in the school besides the 2 of us who were Jewish in our grade, meant that I felt pretty marginalized and different. As I got older, just being a creative person, thinking differently, not necessarily, I did well academically in school, but it wasn't my strength. My strength was in writing and performing and other things that were kind of out of the box, especially in the high school where I grew up. So in many ways, I felt a very strong sense of belonging when I went to college and found other creative folks. But when I found my way, I also sort of had a circuitous route back to Judaism. But by the time I was in my late 20s, I was getting a master's degree in Jewish studies. I was so passionate about Jewish education and the creative possibilities for what Jewish education could look like. So fast forward to the time I described when my son was born in 2003. We did not know that he had a disability until he was 2.5 and not talking. That's when many kids are diagnosed with autism, or parents become concerned when there's such significant speech and language delays. And it took us several years. Often that happens for families. And during that time, I felt extremely isolated. It never occurred to me to turn to Jewish community. I didn't know other people. I didn't know other families like mine and other parents who could guide me. Though eventually it was in a Jewish early childhood program where there was a classroom that could support my son. And it brought me back to the possibility of what community could be for him and for our family. And the coolest thing was that my son is nonverbal. He communicates using a communication device. But from the time he was young, I really began to communicate with him through intuition. I was comfortable sitting with him in quiet space and feeling his presence and connecting on what I consider to be a soul level. And so I could watch and observe how he was reacting to Jewish tradition, whether I put on Jewish music, whether the anticipation of lighting the candles on Shabbat, lifting up the challah cover so he could see what was there. I could see his spark and his excitement and engagement with Jewish ritual. So I cannot say it's been easy, but from that time, I knew that he belonged in the Jewish community. At my synagogue, we actually created a program. My son has intensive sensory sensitivities. Noise could be a barrier to him to participation. Crowds of people, a barrier. Tons of anxiety, a barrier to participating. Many of our Jewish programs pre-COVID, if we think about it, gathering in a synagogue and Purim and Simchat Torah and festivals and things, there are a lot of sensory things going on. And so we created a very quiet, calm, relaxed family program. And that was a beginning back into synagogue life for us. We found a really cool, creative way for my son to become bar mitzvah. And his Jewish life is part of our family life. and not anything I could have imagined when I was thinking about becoming a parent, but he has opened me up to what the possibilities of belonging for every human being can be.
Gabby, I've heard the story of you and Georgie, and I'm just so moved to think about the world with Georgie in it, and his contributions to the world is so important.
Well, thank you, Shelley. We learn from each other, and that's why we tell these stories. So I want to ask you one more question, and then Harry, we're going to get to you in just a moment. Shelley, you have been working, everyone should know, Shelley is one of the original founders of this month, Jewish Disability Awareness, Acceptance, and Inclusion Month, that's become a worldwide phenomenon to shine light on these issues of disability inclusion. That was 13 years ago, Shelley. So give us a little perspective on what was happening in the Jewish community then, and what you've seen 13 years later in terms of the ability for people to belong in communities.
I want to say Mazel Tov. What do you say at 13? Mazel Tov. I know. I can't believe it's been 13 years since we came up with this. I love the little celebration. I love that little icon. I started JDAIM with colleagues from something called the Jewish Special Education Consortium, which doesn't exist anymore. But it was a group of us, mostly educators. And I was one of the few people who was involved beyond educating and focusing on the rest of a person's life as well as part of the Jewish community. And that just resonated with a lot of people, and they wanted to explore this idea of inclusion more. So we decided, first of all, the communities, and they were all over the place. They were in so many different states and cities. They were like the boards of Jewish education, special education component. And that at the time, every community was holding a special ed conference or conference on disability. They'd be doing something special to highlight the fact that they're, number one, are Jews living with disabilities and mental health conditions, and number two, that the community is doing something about it, but it takes the entire community, every one of us, to be a champion, an advocate, and be a supporter, so that all people can feel that sense of belonging. So the idea for JDAIM, and you're going to love this story, and I get asked this all the time, but the idea was to hold these conferences in the same month every year, so that we could pool our resources and maybe share speakers and just share ideas and so forth. And so when we looked at the Jewish calendar back in 2000, this was in 2008, so the year before JDAIM, we looked at the Jewish calendar, and since most of the members of the Special Ed Consortium were educators, we kind of looked at it under that lens. So what happens, looking at the Jewish year, looking at August, when everybody's getting ready for school, there's a lot of teacher professional development, there's getting classrooms ready, there's the high holidays, which take a chunk out of the year or out of the month, and then communities are starting to get going with actual education, and then we have Hanukkah and winter break. And then we looked at the rest of the year. And the idea was, when do people have time to plan this and promote these events? And we were coming up pretty short on that. Then we looked at March. Nobody wanted February because the weather was so unpredictable. January, same thing. Then we looked at March, leading up to Pesach. After Pesach, the whole slew of holidays, and then the end of the school year and Shavuot. And then comes summer and everybody's on vacation in July. We're thinking there is no good month. And then we finally whittled it down to February. because there was nothing hugely going on in that month, either right before. So people could do their planning. And that is how JDAIM ended up in February. And sometimes, ironically, people in the warmer climates will sometimes ask me, why can't we move it February? And I'm like, you have good weather. The hard thing about JDAIM is the weather in February in the, where we all live. Regardless, we power through. And what has changed in that time is simply the understanding and acceptance of the Jewish world, that 20% of our community lives with a disability diagnosis, a mental health condition, and that anyone with the lived experiences also is connected because they are children, they are parents, they are grandparents, they are friends, they are teachers. It's like everybody is connected. We really wanted to get that notion out there because the idea was to raise awareness and then do something about it. So the big caution, of course, is it's February and it's fabulous that there are programs going on every single day of the month around the world. What happens after February? What happens in March and the rest of the year? And that's why we are giving food for thought. We want to plant seeds to think about what comes next. And the second most important thing that's happened, first of all, you have to understand the Jewish community is recognized by other faith communities for how we've come together in this area. And we're like the role models of the Jewish community, the role models for communal organization around this topic that's so important. That's the first thing. The second thing is that there's been a real shift from inclusion. Inclusion is more how we do things, how we come together, and how we look at where we are currently, what's the current landscape of our congregation, of our community, of our schools, and what do we believe we can do better. It's the active inclusion is the active structure that we use. It's creating inclusion committees. It's doing assessments. It's scheduling programs like these throughout the year. It's so many different things. We're really now focusing on belonging because belonging is the universal thing that brings us all together. So and that is where we are. That's the current landscape. And it's a whole lot easier to talk about belonging than it is to talk about inclusion. And I'll tell you why. Think about your own life and think about this. What gives you a sense of belonging in your Jewish life, a sense of belonging to your shul, a sense of belonging to the community, a sense of that warmth within your family? What are those things? That's what's universal, because that's something that most people strive to achieve in their lifetimes. And by doing that, then we open up the doors to doing exactly what we're doing now, having a conversation, getting to know people, understanding each other, what's important to someone, what's their history, and what do they hope to achieve? How have they felt a sense of belonging? And so it really is just this beautiful time, and especially because we've all felt so much isolation that has, prior to COVID, so many people with disabilities and mental health conditions have experienced. And now more and more people have been experiencing this because of COVID. So we're all more compassionate, understanding toward ourselves and towards each other. So Gabby, what have you done?
I really just want to echo what you've affirmed, Shelley, that if we can all touch into what helps us to belong, we can figure out, I was talking about my son and the kind of accommodations he needed. We can figure that out. We can be creative and figure out accommodations. But when we recognize that everyone is just looking for belonging, and that's what we all strive for. And that this is really a month about equity and making sure that our as we going back to Rabbi, to your Devar, the idea of all of us in the Mishkan. So I think it's a great segue, Shelley, to bring in Harry. And Harry, your story is one of growing up here in this congregation. You have been part of Beth El, you've grown up here. And so we're going to invite you to share now what has it meant to grow up here in terms of belonging?
Well, what I will say is that from belonging here, I've been at Beth El for nearly 13 years now. It's definitely been it's crazy to think that, especially given that I've spent 2/3 of my life here. Really, I think with belonging here, I feel like it's just sort of like having autism and ADHD doesn't really matter here, as much, for lack of a better word. It's sort of just I'm just me. It's not, I haven't really been isolated for having autism here. I've been very much included in every single program. If anything, this is probably the place where I'm included the most in my entire life. Like, even compared to high school, compared to college, Beth El has been sort of a rock for me, especially growing up.
So what kinds of things did you do at Beth El? What were let's ask you this. I'm going to ask you this. What were the things at Beth El that really made you feel like, you were just home, that the synagogue was your home?
I mean, first off, I think it's the fact that it's such a small temple. It's sort of like everyone knows everybody. I think that's sort of like, it's that sense of hominess from there. Because we are a small synagogue. It's not like we have it's not like we have a lot of people here. So it's sort of everyone knows everybody, I feel like. And I'm appreciating all the hearts first off, but it's sort of, I think that sense has definitely helped me a lot. I'm sorry if I'm not being coherent right now. I have been sleep deprived lately, but I think it is that sense of everyone knows everyone, sort of like we're all we have at this very moment. Well, not all that we have, but yeah, I don't know.
Harry, it's very much like what I shared, that I grew up in a small town. Our synagogue wasn't super big, and there was something about what you're describing of just a group of people who all know each other. And it sounds like Beth El has just been a place since you've been here where you've had that acceptance, and that's how it should be. First of all, wherever you go in the world, wherever all of us goes, that's really what this idea of belonging is about, that you feel like you're part of the community. I can hear.
Yeah, I think here it's been sort of like we're doing a great job. It's the outside world that needs a lot of help.
Yeah.
Especially like here at college, I've sort of felt very isolated here in terms of having autism, having ADHD. It's been hard, especially with a level of impulsivity that I'm still gaining control over. A lot of people are not as patient with me here. It's also been the same thing in high school, where I never really found a solid group of friends. It's always been like one or two people that I remain close with throughout my high school career and even the college. But I don't know. Like, it's definitely been quite an opening for depression when it comes to just trying to find where I am. It's been a pretty tough journey for me.
Harry, so if we could go to that moment of you being at college and feeling kind of isolated, what do you wish that people knew at college or maybe other places? What do you wish they knew and understood about autism and ADHD that they don't seem to get?
I think for me, one thing that I've been really is the fact that since I am so high functioning, it's like when people find I have autism, they're like, wait, what? the sense of, when people think of autism, they probably think of your son who has nonverbal, sort of just in need of dependent on other people to function, or to assimilate, sort of dependent on, is that sense. Like for me, since I don't have as severe of autism, I could be assumed as someone who's just really strange and not really, or someone who can help it but chooses not to help it. So yeah, I definitely wish people were a little more patient with me, sort of understanding that it's not out of lack of trying or out of dismissal. It's hard for me to learn. It's hard for me to learn social cues, especially. I would go into details, but I'm trying to keep things PG here because in college, we do not say a lot of PG things, frankly. Which definitely makes it difficult discussing it here because I don't want to, I don't know people's boundaries.
Yeah. So let's pause really quickly. Harry, hang on one second. I just wanted to say to Barbara, we got your comments. We're going to do a couple more questions with Harry, but we definitely, Shelley, I think in talking about the big picture of JDAIM, we absolutely want to talk about access for people with physical disabilities and all disabilities, for sure. Just to clarify, Shelley and I, our personal stories happen to be parenting kids with autism, ADHD, so we're there, but we will give you the big picture. There are a lot of this work and these efforts absolutely are about how people can have access with all types of belonging.
Right. And Harry, you know, when we're here and we all support you and we all care for you and you're so important.
Thank you. Thank you.
Whole group of people. And I know it's hard when it's almost like in order to just make sure you get what you need in terms of supports, you have to pull out the labels. You have to go, I have ADHD and this is what, you know,
Yeah.
this is how it affects me. I have autism. This is how it affects me.
And
It gets tiring after a while.
It does. It's exhausting. It's
Yeah.
sort of like sometimes there have been points where sometimes I've wished that I had more severe autism, so it was more apparent. So that way people actually were more patient with me and actually included me versus excluding me because they don't understand that autism is on a spectrum, as Rebecca said in the comments, that it's not like this one diagnosis. It's like I am able to speak for myself.
Right. And that it's, you know, there's the old saying in the autism community, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism.
Exactly.
And everybody is unique. We all are. And I think that's a lens that too often we kind of default to what the labels might mean, what the diagnoses are mean. And it's important to have those diagnoses. I think as you know, living with ADHD, it explained a lot about me. And I realized I wasn't stupid and I wasn't crazy and all these things that I had thrown at myself. And that's a really, you know, those aha moments of understanding that you have got so many gifts and strengths and you bring such light to the world. I want to circle back to those gifts and strengths.
All right.
When we talked the other day, we had a lovely conversation and we talked about music, about the role of music in your life. And you talked about when you discovered music and what that meant to you. Would you like to share that?
Yeah, I think music has sort of definitely been a way for me to communicate things. My mom has often told me that music was my first language. I didn't really start speaking complete sentences until I was about 3. So maybe earlier, I'm not 100% sure. I don't really remember when I started speaking, but you probably wouldn't know that by now. Anyways, it's sort of just this way to express myself. That being said, it's definitely difficult when you have lack of motivation to sort of practice things, especially when you're in a setting where people are so judgmental of you. It definitely makes it a little hard for me to like go and practice my oboe, feeling a sense of judgment either in my head or from other people. But with composition, the really nice thing about it is that you don't need to be an expert at an instrument in order to use it in a composition. Definitely helps. But with electronic music, you just have to sort of have these melodies in your head and be able to put them down onto paper. Or not paper, but onto a computer.
Has that come really naturally to you? I mean, it's like being able to just take something that you hear or create and put it down into the computer or play the music or whatever that is.
It comes relatively naturally to me to an extent. When it comes to, I guess, perfecting, I would use a lot of terminology in terms of electronic music. When it comes to sort of perfecting this exact sound I want, it can be a little bit difficult. And that's why I do need to ask for help, usually from my cousin who has worked in the music industry for a little while. But in terms of just getting your notes down, I definitely hear it in the exact key I want it to be in, especially having perfect pitch definitely helps with that. But
Harry,
sorry, I look like one of y'all were about to speak.
Oh no, go ahead. I went. Do you want to finish that thought, and then I have another question for you.
I've sort of finished that thought. I don't really know where else I'm gonna go with this.
Okay. Well, first of all, I just wanted to say to you, before I ask this question, I want to say to you, I am so grateful for your honesty, Harry, and you coming to this conversation with your community with such honesty and authenticity. And I can tell you that this is looking around the screens of people, a whole community of people who love and support you. But also the reason we're talking about belonging is because everyone on this screen has struggled with it, and those times in my life, I didn't have a particular neurodivergent diagnosis, but many times just felt like I'm kind of strange and different. And that's hard until you find your community. And also for me, just being like, boy, I'm really glad I'm weird because I get to do cool and different things that many people who follow a linear path don't do. So I just wanted to pause and say that, Harry. But also, Shelley and I were really curious, since Beth El has been such an important part of your life, what role do you think Judaism has played in just supporting you, your growth, and what's been important to you in being Jewish?
I think definitely the fact that something I can connect from autism and Judaism is this may be a bit of a stretch, but marginalization. The fact that sort of like Judaism makes up less than 1% of the world, to my knowledge, and the fact that anti-Semitism still exists today, it's sort of like that drawback where we're all that we have. It's not like, thank you, Sherwin, for the compliment. Anyways, but I think that's sort of where it comes into play, that to exclude someone from Judaism would be an extreme risk to the survival of our people. So I think sort of like that connection is where all we've got. It definitely helps a lot.
Absolutely, Harry. So thank you. I want to pause for just a moment That's a good segue into a comment that Barbara asked earlier, just because our conversation had really touched on more ADHD and autism. For sure, this month and the work of disability inclusion and the work of belonging is across all kinds of disabilities. And what I think in the work Shelley and I have seen, as we said, are communities figuring out how are we going to support everyone across the spectrum of disability. Those include learning disabilities, mental health issues, physical disabilities, hearing, vision. We know more and more people as you age may experience a change in your ability status. So recognition that where each of us is today is just where each of us is today. My dad is turning 85. I know for him, Shabbat on Zoom has provided a huge sense of belonging. He has hearing loss. He has a vocal tremor. It can be hard to understand his speech, and he doesn't drive at night. And because of Zoom Shabbat, he's got a Shabbat practice back. And we talk all the time, like, Dad, I don't want you to lose that. This is a moment, as Shelley said about the pandemic, where hopefully we're reinventing the idea of community and providing access for people. Not that we have to have all the answers, because there's not a one size fits all with belonging, but that we have the recognition. As you said, Harry, it would be crazy for us to just not have someone be in our tent in that Mishkan that we started with, because there's some kind of obstacle, whether it's hearing, mobility, the neurodivergent aspect of your brain, whatever it is. Going forward, we've just got to figure it out.
Yeah. And what I think what we've learned in all this time, and I have to say that some of my most powerful experiences have been just being in conversation and just learning from people who, the general world thinks, well, yeah, I don't know how to talk to that person. What if they don't understand me? What if I make a mistake? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I do the wrong thing? We're bound to make mistakes in whatever we do, and yet we get to come back and try again. I want to share with you a pretty big mistake I made one time, and I learned so much from it. And I have a friend named Sharon. Sharon has cerebral palsy, and that impacts her voice. And it's really hard sometimes to understand what Sharon says. And one time, this was a number of years ago, we were sitting around and at the shul, she goes to our synagogue, and she was telling me something, and she was like telling me this story, and I was like preoccupied, and I'm going, oh, my ADHD, I want to listen to this conversation, that conversation. Ooh, look at that. There's that cake I really like at the Oneg. And, it really is kind of jolting. But anyway, I was pretending to listen to Sharon. That was my way of being, genuine. That was my way of pretending to pay attention to her, so she'd feel like I was paying attention to her. And I said to her, she finished telling me what she was telling me, and I had no idea what she said. And I said, wow, that's great. That's really good, Sharon. And she looked at me and she was like, she said, I just told you that my cat Goldie died. And I just looked at her and I said, I'm speechless. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Yes, I'm sorry Goldie died. I'm really sorry that I didn't listen to you carefully. And we have these experiences. We're not We're not professionals, we're not perfect, but we are human. And to connect with another human being, person to person, is one of the most powerful things that we can do. Where do we make these connections? That's been challenging to us, certainly on Zoom, on social media, on, I don't know if you do happy hours or if you do Torah study online, if you do anything, find things that are interesting and make those connections to other people, because we all need other people. And that has nothing to do with a diagnosis. It's just who we are as human beings. It's how we're created, that we need other people.
Shelley, on that note, as the hour went by and we're coming into our time of closing together, I would love whoever's comfortable. We had this really beautiful, honest sharing from Harry that I know for me really expanded, kind of opening my heart tonight, Harry. And so I would invite anyone who's feeling up for it to share a reflection, either from the conversation or what you've been thinking about belonging. What does belonging look like for you? Where do you feel that sense of belonging? And what does it mean to you to have a place where you belong? So I would invite you to share that with us in the chat while we take a moment to really process.
Want to say it? Just just
oh
go,
yeah.
So
Oh yeah, I see Linda and Steve's hand. Go ahead, and then Barbara.
Well, a lot of what I see in belonging is acceptance. I've run the gamut. I had two very different, but two children with ADHD. One very cerebrally ADHD who couldn't get enough of education or everything. And in terms of Judaism, took that upon himself. I mean, he ran through the temple when we had a cantor who had an organ. Her mother was the organist. Evan was up there in the rafters, singing with him. And he was just all over the place. But on the other hand, his Hebrew teacher did say, you really can get a headache trying to teach Evan. Then I had one ADHD kid that had more ADHD and aggression. He would get into a lot of fights. But I also have.
He won every one of them.
I have a grandson who's autistic, and he belongs to the Brotherhood Synagogue. They belong to the Brotherhood Synagogue in Manhattan, and they have been very loving. And he has had a tremendous Jewish education on a one-to-one base. Actually, he was diagnosed when he was in around 2.5 when he was in their Hebrew school, in their nursery school, and they were told that we can't deal with this child. And I mean, he went to another school, but when he got older and started to be ready to go to quote Hebrew school, he got a one-to-one tutoring, and he absolutely loves his Jewish learning. And he now, since he had a bar mitzvah, and since his bar mitzvah, he goes every Saturday, he goes to services and he's learning the part of the reading for Rosh Hashanah, because he has been incorporated into their life. I remember when he was a little boy, even when he would go on Saturday morning, and when the cantor would be finished and he liked it, he'd go, do it again. But nobody hit him down like, oh, you have to be quiet. So he has always been accepted.
Oh, what an incredible story of belonging from your kids and your grandchild, Linda. Incredible. Thank you so much. And Barbara, I saw your hand as well.
Yeah, and I think my battery is dying here. But I don't want to tell a story. I want to ask a question. And first, I want to say, Harry, you're our Mozart, so be proud of that. I want to know what Beth El is doing. You know, we talked about how Zoom has made it possible for people who can't drive at night because of, you know, vision issues or whatever. It's also made it possible for people to attend who have mobility issues. And I'm thinking of Joe and Joanne. And what, you know, as things get back to normal, what are we going to do so that those people can continue being part of our community? Because I know, for example, I have talked with Gloria, it means the world to her that she is able to be in book group. She told me she's never been a reader in her life, and she is reading all the time now because she's in our book group, and she can be in our book group because it's on Zoom. And she came every Friday night. That's how I know her. And then she had to stop. Now she can come on Friday nights again and be part of our community and talk to people because it's not live stream, it's Zoom. So what are we going to do so that those things continue? So that if somebody can't see, if they can't hear, if they can't walk, if they, whatever, they can continue to be active members of our community.
Can I just say before, Rabbi, before you jump in, Barbara, what you're raising is what communities are talking about everywhere of all faith traditions. This is it. That suddenly, ironically, the pandemic showed us that access was possible in new ways. And this is a moment of reinventing community. And we absolutely do not want to lose all those opportunities for access, but everyone's talking about it. And of course, Rabbi, if you want to jump in with what you're thinking about it, Beth El.
Well, I'm glad you, first of all, Barbara, thank you so much for asking that question. And Gabby, thank you for broadening it to the entire world, because that's where my mind was going. We're not at the point of what will it look like afterwards. But I think that this conversation and this month of thinking about access and acceptance and inclusion is a springboard for us to continue thinking about it and making sure that we don't lose the progress that we have made in this sort of surprising, almost a side effect of coming together in a virtual space. It's been a wonderful discovery and so good to be engaging with folks who haven't been able to come in person in quite some time. So I don't have and this is what we're doing. Just it needs to remain part of the conversation that we don't lose when things change again. And I hope that anyone who wants to be part of figuring that out will be.
And it's not that what we've learned is that one way isn't better for everybody. And for people who really thrive in an in-person environment, to be on Zoom might present those similar challenges to somebody who really embraces being on Zoom and the accessibility and feeling part of the community. So there's so many, everybody's different. And
yeah, and that's true. There was another talk I heard, and I can't remember who gave it, but they were talking about having a child who was deaf. And they wanted someone who could sign during the services, and they actually ended up paying for somebody to do that because the synagogue could not afford it, and it was just for one person. But you know, and I don't know if our synagogue has any members who would benefit from that, who require that. You know, I don't know. But there are all of those different things for all different kinds of disabilities.
Yeah,
to enable people to participate and be active members of the community.
We are getting close, and I know that Dina wanted to share next. I will just say, when I talk to communities, since you just brought up something economic, Barbara, I really encourage us in this new model of belonging to think about, oh, just because one person needs an interpreter, you know, it's really a communal thing. And if it means that everyone pays an additional $50 a year or whatever it is, that's part of that equity and belonging that we think about the economic impact as
There's
well.
another, sorry, Gabby.
I know. I just want to make sure Dina gets it.
One sec. There's another important thing that we can do, and that is Zoom provides live captioning. It's free. It does not do a good job with Hebrew, but you know, it does a great job with English. It's really good. And it's in the preferences in the settings under accessibility. So if the synagogue can set that up, then what you're going to see as viewers on the bottom of your screen, you're going to see closed captioning. You're going to be able to click on that and it'll automatically bring up the captioning. So and it's free. So it's a good thing. So Dina, hi, welcome. Thank you for your patience.
Yeah, no problem. I'll try to be quick. Hi, I'm Dina. A lot of you that have been to Beth El have like known me, have watched me grow up. I know personally, so I grew up in Westport, and I have learning disability, and it was really hard going through the Westport schools. But I went through religious school, really didn't have any issues. And now finally, after being in Westport for 18 years, and I'm now getting my master's in clinical mental health counseling and working with kids with autism. I do behavioral therapy right now. So this has been a super awesome opportunity for me to hear your stories and think about how I can approach my clients and learn more. And I also teach Hebrew on Sundays. So it's been interesting where I have some kids that are diagnosed with ADHD and how to engage them a little bit differently. And something that I've kind of like learned through my whole process of like going through my counseling program is the one thing that that we're taught to do is do self-care. And the one thing I've always done is always brought myself back to Judaism. And if I ever have like a hard day, I've always like said that I would say like the Shema, or I like listen to Noah Aronson. He does the Baruch Hu in the morning, and I listen to that every day on my way to work. So I've been part of Beth El, and well, my family has been part of Beth El for 18 years. And I mean, here I am back on a random Zoom call. So you never know like where Judaism and the community can take you.
Yashar kochech. It's wonderful. And the work that you're doing, providing that counseling support it's so needed right now and has been for a long time. And I'm just so happy to hear that you're doing this. You're going to impact a lot of people, but yes, taking care of yourselves. And what does self-care look like? It's different for everybody.
And I think we learned in this time, as we said, where so many of us found isolation, we've got to look for those things that connect us spiritually and emotionally and make us feel good. I'm so glad to hear you found that in Jewish ritual and traditions. Beautiful. Karen, you wanted to share.
Karen, you're on mute. There you go.
First, I'd like to say Yasher Koach to my nephew, Harry. I think he spoke beautifully and from the heart and truthfully, and it was important for all of us to hear. And then the next things I have to say are in regards to my daughter, because there's sort of the other side of the coin. My daughter, who is now a senior in high school, was only just recently diagnosed with ADHD and some crossover with symptoms on the autism spectrum. And my daughter, who is extremely bright and was top of her class in Hebrew school,
Their
probably
class.
their class, sorry, non-binary as well on top of everything else. Thanks, Harry. Had a really rough time in Hebrew school, but because they weren't labeled yet, I think everyone had difficulty figuring out what it was. But regardless of what it was, I think that as far as if we're striving towards acceptance and helping kids with disabilities, whether they be behavioral, learning, mental, whether they're, have, if they're autistic or if they have ADHD, I think it's very important for the parents of our synagogue to model behavior and to teach acceptance behavior to their children, because every one of the parents in my child's Hebrew school class could not admit that their child was leaving my child out and bullying my child, because they don't realize that, what their kids are doing when they're not there. So I think that's something that, every school, whether it's religious or not, needs to strive for. And it was very difficult, and we tried to address it, but there was that factor.
Well, until
Said, and because my daughter feel very isolated from the time they graduated Hebrew school, it's been very difficult to get them back into the synagogue, except for Zoom. So I will have to say, to kind of bring it full circle, is that Zoom has given my child in the last 2 years a way not to feel intimidated or worried about entering the building. We put the services, whether it's the Friday night with Rabbi playing the guitar, and even though you may not see my child on Zoom, they're there. They're kind of on the side doing their own thing, but they're there. And it's been a way for them to participate again. So I hope that we continue.
Karen, thank you for sharing that. And to go back to what you said, that this is all of our work, right? To create the culture of belonging and to acknowledge those parents who couldn't see it in their own kid. Like, that's really why Shelley and I are doing this conversation. So we can all acknowledge in ourselves, maybe here are times where I haven't had extended that sense of belonging as much as I could. I'm going to put in the chat, I actually wrote a kid's book last year that's about the Jewish values of inclusion for young kids, like 4 to 8 year olds. Shelley's holding it up there.
Some wonderful.
I think
in my
just like we're having these conversations among adults, and for those of you who are educators, we can't just imagine, because we live in a society that marginalizes difference, and it marginalizes people of all different kinds of disabilities. So we can't just say, oh, we're going to Hebrew school, everyone's going to be nice, right? We have to actually actively teach our kids about the core values of respecting everyone. And it's so painful that happened to your child. And it sounds very healing that they've been able to just be on Zoom and participate in a way that's comfortable. And I hope that only continues.
Karen, I also want to, and thank you for so much for telling your story. I was 42 when I was diagnosed with ADHD. It opened every single door in a way that helped me understand myself. As I mentioned before, I realized this was a bona fide thing. And through that, and I take medication. For me, that's, that makes or breaks it. It's allowed me to soar with my strengths. And so I hope that your child experiences that in their life. And maybe it is even linked in some way to being Jewish or to who knows? But touched my heart. Thank you for sharing. We're going to go to Amy. Hi, Amy.
Hello. So I am also Harry's aunt, and I just wanted to come out and say I am so proud of you, Harry. First of all, you are an incredible human being, which you know, and you know I think so. But I wanted to kind of talk about my own child's experience too, that whether there's a genetic component, whatever it is, I have 2 neurodivergent children. And my elder one was diagnosed with autism at age 4. My younger one he has like the Schrodinger's diagnosis, and it's been going on since he was maybe 3 or 4 years old, where he has, a sensory integration disorder, or he's also face blind, and he has various other issues. And both of them have experienced some degree of exclusion in school, in the synagogue too. And we don't go to Beth El. We live up in the Boston area. But there's this assumption that people make about kids with autism, that they are not social, that they don't reach out to others. And I will say this about Harry specifically. Harry is maybe the most social person I know. And Harry is also the person who always reaches out to my kids to check to see if they're okay. And my kids aren't great at reaching back out because there's the ADHD component too, where the texts just don't get checked. But the amount of caring and genuine concern that I see coming from Harry is touching and beautiful. And I hope it continues, because I love that the cousins are friends with each other. And that, Harry, you said this thing where we're only 1% of the population, if that, and they have to accept me because, we're so small. And that is not the reason. I just want to make that very clear, that you are loved because you are you, and you are part of a community and a family that cherishes you, not because you have to be a part of it or that we have to accept you, is because we want to. And we will always feel that way about you, that we value you and love you. And, we left a synagogue because of issues with acceptance. Not because they didn't accept my children. They accepted my family wholeheartedly, and they accepted my children wholeheartedly. But because they weren't accepting of everyone. And so we left, and we found another community that was a better match and a better fit. And so, yeah, Harry, that's really all I wanted to say, is that you are phenomenal. And I am so glad that you are part of a community that makes you feel welcome and complete. That's it for me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I feel like I want to cry from just this amazing outpouring of love and caring. Just, and also know that you're not alone. It's really clear, no matter what your role is and who you are, you're not alone. There are so many people who have similar experiences, who just want to live their lives the way they want to live their lives, with what's important in their lives, what they care about, what they're passionate about, what they feel their purpose is, or they're becoming that, who they will be, who they want to be. And with all of the support that you all give, and in this congregation, in this community, you're just such a gift, all of you.
I will say, Shelley, as we come to a close, first of all, thank you. It's amazing that so many of you, I know it can be a long time to be on Zoom, but it was such a rich space with everyone's sharing, everyone who shared, as well as your sharing, Harry, that I think rather than even cognitively thinking about, what does belonging mean? We just all had an experience of it. When you think of belonging, I hope you remember this night and the open-hearted sharing and receiving courage and vulnerability. It was truly an experience of belonging. I'm so grateful, Shelley, and thank you, Rabbi, and all of you for creating this opportunity.
I put my email address in the chat. I also put the address for JDAIM, www.jdaim.org, which is on my website, Inclusion Innovations. And feel free to reach out. Gabby, you're going to put the access to In My Kahila.
Yes, I put that in the chat. Shelley and I both have books if you want some more reading about belonging. My book is called The Little Gatecrasher, and it's a story of another part of my family, my amazing great uncle. I'll just drop the link here in the chat. He was 43 inches tall. He had a form of dwarfism. And he was born in 1915 to two Russian Jewish immigrant parents who could barely speak the language, let alone know anything about the society here and how to advocate for their child. But they created belonging right in their home, in their little grocery store that they ran. And so with that foundation of love, much as we saw tonight, my uncle was able to go on and live a life where even though the society around him truly, stared, ridiculed, felt free to make fun of someone because of his size, he knew that he was a human being and created in God's image. So that's what my book is about. And Shelley has an amazing book.
My book is called From Longing to Belonging. And it's a practical guide to including people with disabilities and mental health in your faith community. That was the book. I wrote another book before that, but this is the book I was meant to write. And it has, there are stories, there are Jewish thought and text in the book, and it really talks a lot. I talk a lot about belonging, and then that's the first part of the book, and helps kind of frame this idea that we are all in this together. And then the second part of the book is the how-to. So that's the inclusion part. It's available on Amazon, but honestly, I'm kind of done with Amazon. If you're interested in the book, just send me an email, and we'll take care of you. It's my declaration against the man. I'm not done with Amazon. If that you prefer Amazon, go for it.
Well, I definitely want a copy of that book, because I think that coming out of this conversation, I hope that we'll continue to have conversations among our congregants, trying to apply some of the principles that are in your book and some of the feelings that we are experiencing this evening. And I want to wrap up by saying two things. The first is, if there are folks from Beth El who didn't have a chance to share your own reflections or your own struggles toward inclusion, and want to share them with me so that we can improve things in our own community, please don't hesitate to reach out. And second of all, I really want to thank from the bottom of my heart, Shelley and Gabby, and especially Harry. This was an extraordinary conversation, one that I've never been part of in our community before. And what an incredible way to kick off our very first celebration of JDAIM. I here and now commit that every February we will be celebrating it, and hopefully in all the months in between. So thank you to all of you for spending this evening together with us, and look forward to continuing the conversation soon.
We'll see you all Lehitraot, and thank you so much for inviting us. And Harry, you just lighten the load for the rest of us. You give us hope. So thank you. And everyone, take care. Be well. Rabbi, thank you so much.
What an honor. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.